Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. A little later in the program, Colorado takes on international affairs. Stay tuned for that, it's going to be great. But first, as a Republican, let me tell you, we Republicans know what chicks like. That's why we do so well with women. To talk about that from Colorado's Women's Project, Krista Kafer.
Hi, Colorado's Future Project.
Future Project.
But it is an initiative of the Independent Women's Forum. So you're on to something there.
I was close. I was close. And that great Democratic hack, Laura Chapin, thank you for being here.
Also
Strategist.
Also known as the person who's kind of been on the winning side for the last couple of years.
Didn't your mother tell you about manners, being a good sport?
In the words of Nuke Lelouch, we like winning. It's, better than losing.
I think she's allowed to brag.
Sadly, we wouldn't know. We're Republicans. All right, let's get to this. Let's talk about the gender gap between not just the two parties, but also the philosophy that seems to work. What is there a sizable gender gap nationally between the two parties, and what about here in Colorado?
Well, I think operationally what has happened is, in some ways, you've seen a reverse of what used to be a conservative value, which was staying out of people's private lives. Traditionally, and my mother was a Goldwater girl, there was a very big philosophy.
Oh, she must have been hot.
Yeah, she was back in the day. But she, and a lot of people, traditional conservatives, believed that what you do in your private life is your own business. And there are a lot of things of which you might disapprove, but you didn't believe that government had a role in coercing that behavior or determining that behavior for other people. So what's happened in the gender gap has been a sort of a reversal of that role, where Republicans are the ones doing all these bills trying to say, well, there are things of which we disapprove, so we want to legislate them, and Democrats saying, you know what, you may not like it, but it's not really your business.
Now, let me challenge that. I think the left likes to paint the right with this narrative that everyone on the right is a focus on the family, social con who wants to use the strong arm of government to socially engineer what goes on in your home. Personally, I think it goes the other way around, but that narrative seems to stick.
The narrative seems to stick, and it's kind of ironic because the Republican Party is, we're part libertarian, part conservative. But if you look at Colorado, we had less of a gender gap this time around than the nation, which is great. But
You're talking about the presidential election.
Exactly. But I think it's interesting the way the Democrats have reacted. This session, they have introduced so many socially pointed bills. I mean, they're all about, the gay issue, all about sex education. They're the ones that are putting out these social agendas. And I think, meanwhile, the Republicans are working on, the economy, that kind of thing.
There's still a core group of social cons that no matter what feel that, you got to put the Ten Commandments in school buildings. This year, of course, we're going to outlaw abortion bill, which you wonder why anyone would waste their ballot or their bill title. You get 5 bills to put into the legislature as a legislator. Why would you do that? It doesn't have a chance of passing even the first hurdle. But it's those type of stories that I think your team is very good at saying that's what Republicans are. And from my perspective, no, that's one small part of the Republican coalition, and they're becoming less and less effective all the time.
Well, you are what you introduce. As a party, you decide your priorities in terms of, each legislator has 5 bills, and, if that's what you want going forward, then, that's what you do.
But that knife cuts both ways. When you've got Democrats saying if you're building a new property, you have to have, for your tenants, a plug-in station for their electric car. You're telling us what kind of guns we can and cannot own. We're talking. It goes both ways when people are trying to dictate people's behavior and what they own and what they do at home.
But I think what's happened on the gender gap issue, to go back to it, I think women voters and Western voters in general are really allergic to being told what to do. And there is a feeling that the Republican Party right now is investing a whole lot of time in trying to tell women what to do.
But doesn't the left tell people what to do all the time? From here's how you have to make your electricity from windmills, here's what you have to teach your kids in schools, here you have to keep it in the government monopoly of education. Why is it that it seems to cut one way so well, but not the other?
Well, I think, not to wander too far afield, but I think in a lot of cases, for instance, for the renewable portfolio standard, what you found is the market will adjust to the mandate, that companies will figure out how to make money off renewable energy, and they're not in that business.
Well, corporate welfare goes on both sides, and that's all it is corporate welfare.
But I do think, for instance, if you're looking at a reproductive health issue, I mean, one of the reasons insurance companies don't cover birth control because it's a moral decision. For them, it's an economic decision. It's cheaper to cover birth control than it is to cover, insuring a kid or paying for an abortion. So, when you're talking about these kinds of behaviors, one of the most fundamental economic decisions any family makes is whether or not to have a child. And so when you have Republicans coming in on these social issues and trying to interfere in that decision-making process, I think is when you run aground not just of women voters, but just sort of that Western mentality in general.
The Obama team had a great success with this war on women narrative. And when I heard about the Obama mandate that employers must provide these services and contraception through Obamacare, whether you wanted it or not, so people who have Catholic churches now have to perform services they didn't want to perform, part of me goes, wait a second, I thought we believed in freedom of religion. I thought the leave us alone part of this was, people get to make those own decisions of in a religious place, we make that clear. So I thought there might be this backlash that way, but instead, no, the narrative of this is a war against women worked. Why did that work so well? Why did it hook?
Well, it hooks for certain women, and it hooks for the fact that some of the most brilliant people are out there saying it. But we've come back with a counter-narrative here at the Colorado's Future Project to say, you know what, this is about conscience. If you want to have birth control, go and buy your birth control. The fact is that government shouldn't be telling people what to do. It shouldn't be trampling upon consciences. And here is the irony. I went to buy a 100-watt bulb the other day and couldn't get one.
Sinner.
Because of politicians.
Sinner.
So light bulbs, or you go to New York City and it's a liberal mayor said you can't have a big soda. You give birth in a hospital in New York City, you can't even see the formula because he's asked the hospitals to hide the formula. Why are politicians telling us about what kind of light bulbs we can have, what foods we can eat, what drinks we can drink, what we should purchase, what our health care should look like? I want these guys out of my business.
But you can't deny that the narrative that Laura just gave us hooks on. It worked. That this year, it certainly worked. The gender gap, although it wasn't here in Colorado, nationwide, Romney did not appeal to women. Why?
Well, I could see why it might work with single women. I mean, I'm a single woman, and there was a time when I was a liberal Democrat, and the idea of woman as victim worked for me. And it wasn't until I began to see myself as an empowered individual who wants to make her own decisions and wants to be left alone that I left the Democrat Party. And I would be surprised if we see more young women saying, hey, I don't want to be part of your agenda. Don't take care of me. Don't give me a leg up. Just leave me alone. And I think it would be very likely that we could start to see a shift in the future.
I remember the Julia story on the Obama page, and I went there. I went through the slideshow, and I found it. I don't know a chick that wouldn't be insulted by it. It was government helps out at your birth. Government is there to get you into school. Government then pays for your education. Then government pays for your health care. Then college, and then on your welfare, and then then you have kids, and that's of course there was no husband, and then it kept going. And the narrative was this woman Julia would be a helpless little babe in the woods who wasn't empowered enough to take care of her own life, and that every moment of her life was intertwined with some sort of welfare program. Now, that went out, and Julia kind of went away pretty fast. Did it backfire?
I don't think so, and I think I think there's a misrepresentation of what it was about. I mean, the fact is, government is fundamentally an instrument of our will. It is within our power to decide its course and decide what it does or doesn't do. But I do think that there is a belief that if government is going to be there, then it needs to be there in a way that provides some kind of a safety net and that does provide some kind of a fundamental underpinning to provide some kind of a direction and some kind of a way to facilitate.
Would you want to be Julia?
I have no problem. I'm
Really?
speaking as someone who has.
You would want to be the woman who every part of her life was made possible by a government handout.
It's not a matter of it being possible. It's the fact that government is present in our lives in ways that we may or may not acknowledge.
If the Republicans hired you, let's say
Yeah.
they threw enough money at you,
Right.
and they said, come over to our side and tell us how we can get more female voters, what would be the top 3 things you would tell them to do?
Stay out of people's bedroom.
But that's where all the good pictures come from.
Yes, but there's just there's just some things where my advice would be knock it off with sonogram bills and anything affecting reproductive rights and reproductive health care. Just seriously stay out of it. Support marriage equality, support people's rights to make their own decision about their own private contracts between 2 consenting adults. And I would say look for ways to be more creative about some idea of helping people, facilitating people getting into and staying in the middle class. I mean, one of the things, I said these decisions on reproductive health care are not being made in a moral fashion. They're being made because they are fundamentally economic.
Let's take those. One of the things that I think might be good for Republicans is now civil unions. It's a done deal. All right, there is no stopping it. It's going to happen, and I think a lot of women are very sensitive. You put it marriage equality, but they're sensitive to this issue. It's gone. It's done. There will be no arguing after this session. When it comes to reproductive rights, that's done. It's not like Obamacare is going to be turned over anytime soon. It's not like Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned. And if it was, it just goes back to the states. And here in Colorado, abortion was legal. Are Republicans now free to go after different issues since these tough social issues, I think a lot of them are gone?
Well, I think for a lot of people, the issue of the sanctity of human life is never going to be gone, any more than slavery was ever going to be gone until it was gone. I mean, the fact is that that's important to a lot of people. And so there are going to be Republicans out there like myself that are talking about economics, that are talking about the American dream, that are talking about empowering women. And I'm not going to get down on somebody who wants to make the sanctity of human life an issue, even though it's not an issue that I am speaking about.
But when
we have a big tent, John.
But the other team, it's not the other team, it's the people in the middle, are persuaded that 5% of Republicans who are hardcore social cons, that represents the whole lot of us. And that's not true, but that's the image. How do you stop that image?
I think we stop that image by having a lot more voices out there. We are a big tent party. We're libertarians. There are social conservatives. I mean, half the country polls as being pro-life, so it really isn't not. It's pretty mainstream to be pro-life. Can some Republicans choose not to speak about it? Those for whom it's who want to put their foot in their mouth. Sure, I would love it if everyone who doesn't speak well about certain things would just shut up. That would be nice. But like it or not, we're a big tent party. I think we need to get voices out there, and I think we need to find press outlets that will focus on all of us and not just a random few.
I think I'm hearing 2 things. So you're saying Republicans just need to shut up, and you're telling me Republicans just need to shut up.
Some guys do.
Not
Some
me.
guys do.
All right, Laura, thank you so much. Krista, thank you so much. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.